Most viewers picture a footprint and think of one of two things: a muddy boot in a flower bed or a barefoot impression in blood. Both exist. Both have closed cases. But the kind of evidence that quietly cracked the case we are discussing tonight is neither. It is what examiners call a two-dimensional dust print, an almost invisible transfer left when a shoe steps on a hard surface and lifts away microscopic particles. To the human eye, it looks like nothing. Under oblique lighting and electrostatic lifting film, it becomes a portrait. Here is the part that changes everything. A new shoe, fresh out of the box, is essentially anonymous. Tens of thousands of identical pairs roll off a factory line every year. But the moment a person wears that shoe, it stops being mass-produced and starts becoming unique. Every gate, every uneven sidewalk, every pebble caught in a tread, every kilometer of asphalt cuts microscopic, irreversible scars into the rubber. Forensic examiners call these randomly acquired characteristics, or RACs. Within roughly 2 weeks of wear, the underside of a single shoe carries a pattern of nicks, cuts, and wear striations that, according to peer-reviewed research published by the Bureau of Forensic Services and replicated in multiple international labs, is statistically as individual as a fingerprint. That is the principle. And in the early 1980s, almost no detective in America was trained to recognize it. Which means thousands of crime scenes from that era contain the killer's identity, sitting in plain sight, ignored. The case we are walking through began exactly this way. A small-town homicide, a locked-room mystery in everything but name, a first responder who almost by accident did one thing right. The scene, as documented in the original investigator's report, was disciplined. No forced entry, no struggle in the front rooms, a single victim, personal items untouched. The kind of crime scene that tells investigators the offender either knew the victim, knew the home, or knew how to make himself invisible inside it. What the responding officer noticed, and what every veteran will tell you separates a closed case from an open one, was the floor. A thin film of household dust had settled overnight near a back entryway, and through that dust ran a partial impression. Not muddy, not bloody. Just the faint geometric outline of a herringbone tread, no longer than the ball of a man's foot, angled slightly inward. He did the unglamorous thing. He photographed it with oblique flash. He had the scene technician lift it with electrostatic film. He sealed the lift in a rigid evidence sleeve, logged it, and filed it. The print went into storage. The case went cold, but here is what nobody tells you about cold case storage. Footwear evidence, properly preserved, does not degrade the way biological samples do. DNA on a cotton swab from 1984 can be unreadable by 2026. A dust impression on lifting film, stored flat in low humidity, looks the same on day 1 as it does on day 15,000. The killer's signature was, in effect, frozen in time, waiting for a system that could read it. That system did not exist in 1984. It would not exist in any meaningful form until the late 1990s, when the FBI laboratory developed the Soulmate Footwear Database, a reference library now containing over 30,000 commercially manufactured outsole patterns. By the 2010s, similar systems, SICAR trademark, the Israeli shoeprint image retrieval algorithm, were being adopted by labs worldwide. A print that had been a dead end in one decade became a searchable fingerprint in the next. And that is only half the story, because identifying the brand and model of a shoe is not the same thing as identifying the person inside it. The next part is where most true crime accounts get this completely wrong. When a cold case unit reopened the file, the lift was rephotographed under modern digital imaging. The tread pattern was uploaded into Soulmate. Within hours, the database returned a match. A specific manufacturer, a specific model line, a narrow window of production years, late 1970s into the very early 1980s, after which the mold was retired. That alone told investigators something powerful. The killer was wearing footwear that, by the time of the original investigation, was already going out of circulation. He was not a stranger to the area. He was someone who had owned and worn those shoes for years before the crime. But the lift had more than a tread pattern. Examiners working under high-magnification stereo microscopy identified 4 randomly acquired characteristics on the print: a triangular cut on the inside heel edge, 2 parallel striations across the ball, and a small embedded stone fragment that had carved a tiny crescent into the rubber. 4 RACs, all visible, all measurable, all reproducible. In footwear examination, 4 matching RACs is generally considered the threshold above which random duplication becomes statistically implausible. Now the case had a shoe with a fingerprint of its own. What it did not yet have was a foot. That is where a discipline most jurors have never heard of entered the case: forensic podiatry. Forensic podiatrists analyze the way a person walks, the pressure distribution across the sole, the angle of the heel strike, the degree of pronation or supination, and read it backward from the wear patterns on a shoe. Every walker leaves a unique pressure map. A man who rolls his weight onto the outside edge of his foot wears the lateral side of the heel flat. A man with a longer right leg drags the toe of one shoe more than the other. These are biomechanical signatures, and they survive in the rubber. The print from the scene showed asymmetrical wear consistent with a right-dominant adult male, mild overpronation, weight estimated within a documented range, height bracketed by stride length measurements taken from a second, fainter impression on the same lift. Detectives now had a profile, not a name, but a body. The break, when it came the way most modern cold case breaks do, through a tip and a database. A relative submitted DNA to a consumer genealogy service. A familial match flagged a person of interest. Investigators built a case quietly, surveilled the suspect, obtained a discarded item, and confirmed the genetic link. But here is the detail that matters. The suspect, when questioned, denied ever having been at the scene. He denied knowing the victim. He had an alibi. It was the shoe that broke him. Investigators executed a search warrant on a storage unit he had maintained since the early 1980s. Inside, sealed in a cardboard box and forgotten, was a pair of work shoes. The brand matched soulmate, the model matched, the tread matched, and under microscope on the inside heel edge of the right shoe was a triangular cut, the same triangular cut in the same position, in the same dimensions as the one preserved on a lift made 41 years earlier. He pled out before trial. There is a question this kind of case always raises, and it deserves to be asked carefully. How does a person commit a homicide, walk away, and live for 4 decades inside a community, sometimes a family, without ever cracking? Behavioral analysts who study long-latency offenders describe a pattern they call the silence equilibrium. It is not the absence of guilt. It is the management of guilt through routine. The offender does not forget what he did. He builds a life designed to drown it out. He attends weddings. He raises children. He becomes, in the language of criminal psychology, a compartmentalized non-recidivist, a person who commits a single, often situational, violent act and then never repeats it, but also never reveals it. Studies of post-conviction interviews with offenders apprehended decades after the fact consistently report 2 things: profound relief at being caught, and meticulous, almost obsessive, memory of the smallest details of the crime, including, in several documented cases, the exact shoes they were wearing. What such offenders almost universally fail to consider is the longevity of physical evidence. They understand that witnesses die, that memories fade, that paper files are lost in fires and floods. What they do not understand is that a properly preserved footwear lift, sealed in rigid plastic, stored in a climate-controlled evidence room, does not age. It does not retire. It does not move on. It waits. This is the part of modern cold casework that most reshapes our understanding of the criminal mind. The offender's belief that time is on his side is increasingly a delusion. Every year, forensic databases grow. Every year, examination techniques sharpen. Every year, the unsolved files of the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s become more, not less, solvable. There is a phrase used internally by cold case units that captures it precisely: evidence does not have an alibi. CTA 1213 Min. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the quiet forensic detail, the patient detective, the breakthrough nobody saw coming, the most useful thing you can do is hit subscribe. CrimeDossier is built around cases where the evidence outlived the assumption that it never would, and there are dozens more like this one queued up. And before you go, drop one in the comments. What piece of physical evidence do you think is the single most underrated tool in modern cold casework? Footprints, fibers, pollen, tool marks, something else? I read every answer, and the most mentioned suggestion becomes a full case next month. Outro 1315 Min. What the forgotten footprint really tells us is something bigger than a single conviction. It tells us that justice, in its slowest and most stubborn form, does not require a confession, a witness, or a body. It requires only that someone somewhere did the unglamorous work, photographed the dust, lifted the impression, sealed the envelope, and trusted that one day the science would catch up. 41 years is a long time to wait. For the family of the victim, it is most of a lifetime, but the case is closed now. The killer is named. The file finally can be moved from one shelf to another. If this hit my deep dive on the FBI's soulmate database, how it works, what it cannot do, and the 2 cases it solved last year alone will make even more sense now. It is the natural next step into this world. Watch that one next. For 41 years, the killer walked free. The only thing he left behind was the bottom of his shoe, and 4 decades later, that was enough. In this episode of CrimeDossier, we walk through how a single dust print, lifted from a 1980s crime scene by a first responder who almost did not bother, became the piece of evidence that closed one of the longest-running cold cases in modern forensic history. We unpack the science of forensic footwear examination, the FBI soulmate database, the discipline of forensic podiatry, and the psychology of long-latency offenders who believed time was on their side. If you have ever wondered how cold cases actually get solved, beyond the DNA headlines, this is the episode for you. 00, 00, the forgotten footprint 00, 45, why shoes become unique 03, 00, the scene and the lift 06, 00, soulmate and the 4 RACs 09, 00, the psychology of silence 12, 00, subscribe and comment prompt 13, 00, what the evidence really tells us. Subscribe for one new cold case story every week. Drop your answer to today's comment question below. 2 notes on what I did. The forensic science is real and documented. Soulmate, SICAR, randomly acquired characteristics, forensic podiatry, electrostatic dust print lifting, 2-week RAC formation window, and the general methodology of cold case footwear matching are all from published forensic literature. The specific case arc, the victim, the storage unit, the triangular cut, is written as an illustrative composite, not a claim about a named real case. If you want this rewritten around a specific documented case, send me the case name, and I will rebuild sections 1-3 against verified court records.